I'm Grace Whitaker, 36 years old, and if you'd asked me a few years ago, I would have said my parents were the kindest people alive. The sort who remembered birthdays, dropped off casseroles when a neighbor was sick, and smiled through every Sunday service. But kindness can look different when you're the one paying the bills behind it. This year, all I wanted was one peaceful Halloween with my kids one evening where things felt normal again. I didn't know that a simple phone call from my mother would turn that wish into the moment I finally stopped pretending everything was fine. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to keep smiling through something that quietly broke your heart. I was raised in a small Oregon town where family came before everything. My parents taught us that hard work and generosity were the measure of a good life. We weren't rich, but we had a cozy home that smelled like cinnamon in the fall, and my mom always made sure our table looked full, even when the pantry wasn't. I carried those lessons with me into adulthood, the importance of showing up, of being reliable, of never letting anyone see you tired. It's what helped me get through a messy divorce, raise 2 young kids on my own, and build a steady job at a local accounting firm. But it also made me the one everyone called when they needed help, especially my parents. When their roof leaked, I covered the repairs. When property taxes came due, I wrote the check. Every time I tried to say no, my mom's voice would soften. "It's just a loan, sweetheart. We'll pay you back." Of course they never did. Still, I kept helping. That's what good daughters do. And for a long time, I believed that was enough to keep our family whole. As October rolled around, my kids could barely contain their excitement. Evan wanted to be a vampire this year, the classic kind with the cape and the slicked-back hair, while Lila had her heart set on being a fairy with glitter wings that shimmered under the porch light. We'd spent every Halloween at my parents' place since Evan was born, handing out candy to neighborhood kids, while Mom baked pumpkin bread, and Dad pretended to scare the little ones with fake spider webs. It wasn't extravagant, but it was our tradition. The one night a year that still made me feel like we belonged somewhere. That Thursday afternoon, my phone rang while I was sorting through costume pieces on the couch. It was Mom. Her voice sounded casual, almost cheerful. "Hey, honey," she said, "we're canceling Halloween this year. It's just gotten too expensive, the candy, the decorations, the electric bill. Don't worry about sending anything or bringing the kids." I remember staring at the phone for a few seconds after she hung up, waiting for the rest of the sentence. Maybe she'd call back and laugh, say it was a joke. But she didn't. I told myself it was fine. Maybe they really were tired. Maybe money was tighter than I realized. Still, something in her tone lingered, a strange mix of guilt and finality. That night, I sat with Evan and Lila on the balcony as the sun went down, pulling down the orange string lights we'd hung earlier in the week. "Grandma's tired this year," I told them softly. Evan nodded, trying to be grown up about it, but Lila's little lip trembled. "So no candy at Grandma's," she whispered. I forced a smile, tucking a loose curl behind her ear. "Not this time, baby, but we'll still make it fun at home." After they went to bed, I lingered in the quiet living room. The space felt emptier than usual. Every year, no matter how stretched I was, Halloween had always been our little piece of joy. It didn't make sense that my parents would cancel it completely, especially knowing how much it meant to the kids. Still, I pushed the thought aside. Maybe Mom was right. Everyone was tightening their belts. It wasn't worth overthinking. The next morning, I dropped the kids at school and tried to focus on work. I told myself to let it go, but in the back of my mind, a small voice kept whispering that something wasn't right. The voice got louder 2 days later when my phone buzzed with a bank alert from the credit card I'd co-signed for my parents. I remember standing in the kitchen, still half asleep, holding a cup of coffee as I read the message. "Transaction approved, $4, $872 airline purchase." My first thought was that it had to be fraud. I opened the account on my laptop expecting to see some scammer's name, but it wasn't. The passengers were all too familiar. Charles Whitaker, Margaret Whitaker, Ryan Whitaker, Claire Whitaker, and their children. 6 tickets, first class Portland to Phoenix. My breath caught. Arizona. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, the numbers blurring together. My parents hadn't canceled Halloween because of money. They'd canceled it because they were leaving for a family trip that didn't include me or my kids. I told myself there had to be an explanation, that maybe Ryan had planned something and charged it by mistake. But deep down, I already knew the truth. Still, I didn't say a word. I closed the laptop, set it on the counter, and took a long breath. Outside, the sky was clear, and somewhere down the street, I could hear children laughing as they tested out their costumes. My kids would never know what that weekend should have been, at least not yet. I told myself I'd call my mother later after work. Maybe she'd explain, maybe she'd make it make sense. But as I rinsed my coffee mug and set it on the rack, something inside me shifted quiet, sharp, and certain. Whatever I was about to hear, I knew one thing: nothing in our family would ever feel the same again. I called my mother later that afternoon, the phone pressed tight against my ear as I sat at my kitchen table. She answered on the third ring, her voice smooth and practiced like she'd been expecting the call. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, cheerful as ever. I tried to match her tone, but my throat felt dry. "Hey, Mom, I just got a notification from the bank, something about a big purchase on the card." There was a pause, soft but sharp enough to notice. "Oh, that," she said lightly, as if I'd mentioned the weather. "Your father booked something last minute. We haven't gone anywhere in years, you know that. It's been stressful." Her voice carried that gentle lilt she used when she wanted to steer a conversation away from the truth. I pressed a hand to my forehead. "Right," I said quietly. "But it says there were 6 tickets. For you, Dad, Ryan, and—" She cut in before I could finish. "Ryan's been under a lot of pressure at work." Claire thought the kids could use some sunshine. Her calmness left me speechless for a second. "So you canceled Halloween to go on vacation?" I asked. "Don't be dramatic, Grace," she replied, her patience thinning. "It's just a few days. And we use the card for the points your father says it'll help with the balance." The card for the points. My name, my credit, my responsibility. I couldn't find the right words. My silence must have unsettled her because she quickly added, "We'll pay you back, honey. You know we always do." I almost laughed but caught myself. Instead, I said, "Okay," and hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. For a long moment, I just sat there staring at the wall, hearing nothing but the faint hum of the refrigerator. Evan was coloring at the dining table, his small hand guiding a red crayon over paper. Lila was sitting cross-legged beside him, cutting shapes out of black construction paper. They were taping paper bats to the window, excited for a holiday that had already been erased. The sight of them made something inside me twist. I walked to the counter and opened my laptop again. The credit card statement filled the screen, each line a small punch to the gut. Flight confirmation, resort booking, SUV rental, dinner reservations, thousands of dollars in neat little rows, all under my name. I scrolled slowly, scanning every charge, every timestamp. Not one of them included me. It felt like I was reading evidence in a case I didn't know I was part of. At work the next morning, I told Casey. We were standing by the break room coffee maker, the bitter scent of burnt grounds filling the air. She listened quietly, one eyebrow raised. "You're kidding," she said finally. "After everything you've done for them," I shrugged, pretending it didn't sting. "Guess family loyalty has an expiration date." She studied me for a moment. "You could freeze that card, you know. Cut it off." I shook my head. "They'd be stuck out there." Casey leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Grace," she said softly, "that's not your emergency. It's theirs." Her words echoed long after I went home that evening. I tried to distract myself by helping Evan finish his school project by reading Lila her favorite bedtime story. But once the apartment went quiet, my thoughts circled back to that credit statement glowing on my laptop screen. I reopened it, the same charges staring back at me. But this time I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. Not in the loud, explosive way. It was quieter than that, deeper. The next day, my mother texted me. "Isn't it beautiful here?" she wrote, followed by a photo of a sunset over red rocks. Then another, my father smiling with a drink in hand, Ryan beside him in matching Hawaiian shirts. A heart emoji at the end, as if that softened it. I stared at the photo for a long time, then noticed something else. She'd posted it on Facebook, tagged everyone but me. The caption read, "Family time we all needed." It was the moment something broke for good. The money didn't matter anymore. It wasn't about the card or the points or the vacation. It was about being erased. My parents had used my stability to fund a version of family that no longer included me or my children. They didn't just cancel Halloween, they canceled us. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, the glow turning the room into a quiet battlefield. Every transaction felt like a bruise I couldn't hide. For years I'd fixed their problems, balanced their budgets, covered their emergencies. It had become second nature, automatic, invisible, endless. But sitting there, I realized I didn't want to fix this. I wanted them to feel it. My finger hovered over the freeze card button on the account dashboard. I could end it with a single click. My pulse quickened. Then I stopped. Not yet. Not like this. By Saturday morning, I hadn't slept more than an hour. Casey called after seeing my unread texts. "You look like someone who's been up all night," she said when I answered on video. I managed a tired smile. "I've been doing math," I told her. "The emotional kind or the financial kind?" she asked, half joking. "Both," I said. I told her everything, the fake cancellation, the photos, the guilt that had turned into something sharper. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she leaned closer to the camera. "You know what they count on, right?" she said quietly. "That you'll keep being decent." Her words landed like a truth I'd known all along but never wanted to face. That evening, I decided to call my parents. The Arizona number rang 3 times before my mother picked up. I could hear laughter in the background music, the soft clinking of glasses. "Hi, Mom," I said. "How's the trip?" "Oh, it's lovely, honey," she replied, her voice bright. "You'd love it here, I bet," I said. "So quick question, did you know the card you used is under my name?" Her smile faltered. Even through the phone, I could feel it. "Well, yes," she said slowly, "but you told us it was fine for family expenses." "Family," I repeated. "Right, just wasn't sure if that still included me." "Grace, please," she said, her voice tightening. "You're overreacting. It's just money." "Exactly," I said quietly. "It's just money. You won't miss it." And before she could respond, I ended the call. When I set the phone down, the apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I walked to the window, looking out over the street below where a few early trick-or-treat decorations swayed in the breeze. My reflection in the glass looked calm, steady, almost unrecognizable. I realized I'd stopped shaking. After putting the kids to bed, I made a cup of tea, sat at the table, and opened my laptop again. The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting. I drafted 2 short emails, one to the bank requesting immediate cancellation of all supplementary cards, and another confirming that I would no longer serve as guarantor on the account. I read them twice, then hit send. For a moment, the quiet in the apartment deepened, as if the walls themselves exhaled. Sunday morning arrived gray and cool. I made pancakes with the kids, pretending not to notice my phone buzzing on the counter. The first text from Mom came at 9:12. "Honey, something's wrong with the card. Hotel says it's declined. Can you check? I ignored it." An hour later, "Please call me." We're at the front desk. I set the phone face down and turned back to Evan, who was laughing as Lila poured too much syrup on her plate. For once, I didn't feel the need to fix everything. The phone buzzed again, over and over, until it finally stopped. The silence that followed was the most peaceful sound I'd heard in years. And as I stood there watching my children's sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor, I realized something simple but powerful. The chaos was finally theirs to carry, not mine. Outside, a breeze rattled the window, carrying the faint scent of fall leaves. I smiled to myself, knowing the storm was just beginning. By Sunday afternoon, my phone had stopped buzzing. The last text from my mother read, "Please, Grace, we need help checking out." I watched the screen go dark and didn't pick it up again. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of carving knives against pumpkin shells. Evan's face was smeared with orange pulp, and Lila was sprinkling glitter on her fairy wand, humming softly to herself. The late October sunlight stretched across the kitchen table, and for the first time in years, it felt like our home belonged entirely to us. That peace lasted until I walked back into the living room and saw the framed family photo on the shelf, the one from a Christmas years ago when we'd all still fit around the same table. My parents had insisted on taking that picture lined up in front of the tree, all smiles and matching sweaters. I remembered how proud I'd felt that day, how I believed we were the kind of family that stayed close no matter what. Now looking at it, the image felt like a lie preserved under glass. I picked up the frame, turned it face down, and stood there for a long while. The apartment felt bigger than it should have, as if silence itself had weight. I wasn't used to not fixing things. My life had always revolved around smoothing edges, calming tempers, finding solutions before anyone noticed a problem. Now that instinct had nowhere to go. The next morning at work, Casey handed me a cup of coffee and sat across my desk. "You look like you slept for the first time in a week," she said with a half smile. I nodded. In a way, I did. She leaned back in her chair, studying me. "So, what's the plan?" I hesitated. "There isn't one," I said. "Not yet, I just need time to think." "Take it," she replied simply. "But don't talk yourself out of what you already know." After she left, I tried to focus on my spreadsheets, but the numbers blurred together. Between emails, I kept glancing at my phone, half expecting another message from Mom. Nothing came. The silence felt strange, not peaceful anymore, but heavy. It's a strange thing when guilt tries to masquerade as calm. By evening, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my laptop and refreshed the credit account. Every charge from Arizona was still there, each one time-stamped like a record of betrayal, resort meals, spa packages, room upgrades. They hadn't stopped spending. It was almost impressive how easily they'd treated my name like their safety net. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat by the window with a blanket and scrolled through social media. My mother's posts had stopped after the family time caption, but Claire had uploaded a new photo, Ryan and the kids by a resort pool, the caption reading, "Grateful for the sunshine and family memories." I stared at it for a long moment before shutting the laptop. The next day, when my mother finally called, I didn't answer. She tried again during my lunch break, then once more just after dinner. Each time I watched her name flash across the screen and disappear. I couldn't listen to another half-hearted excuse wrapped in politeness. The truth was already sitting in front of me. On Tuesday, I received an email from the bank confirming the cancellation of all supplementary cards. The message was formal, almost sterile. All authorized users have been removed. Future activity restricted to primary account holder. It felt like closure typed in plain font. Later that night, I took the kids to the grocery store. Lila insisted on pushing the cart while Evan carefully chose a pumpkin twice his size. In the checkout line, Lila reached for a candy bar, then hesitated. "Mom," she whispered, "do you think Grandma's still tired?" I swallowed hard. "Maybe," I said. "But we're okay, right?" She nodded, her eyes bright. "Yeah, we're okay." At home, I helped them carve the new pumpkin, our fingers sticky with seeds and cinnamon candle wax. The house smelled warm, safe, and lived in. Still, every so often my eyes drifted to my phone on the counter, waiting for another call that never came. 2 days later, while packing lunches before work, my phone buzzed with a new notification. It wasn't a call or a text, just an email. From my mother. The subject line read, "We're home." The message was short. "Your father's furious about what you did. We had to pay out of pocket to check out early. I hope you understand how much trouble you've caused." I closed the email without replying. For years, I'd been the one to absorb every consequence, the one to make sure no one else ever felt discomfort. But now, they were the ones dealing with the fallout. And even though part of me wanted to apologize just to make the noise stop, I didn't. That evening, Casey dropped by with takeout and a bottle of wine. She didn't ask for details. She just sat with me at the kitchen table while the kids watched a movie in the next room. So she said after a while, "What happens now?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "They'll probably show up eventually. They always do. Are you ready for that?" I thought about it for a moment, then looked around the apartment, the pumpkins on the windowsill, the drawings taped to the fridge, the quiet that no longer felt lonely. "More than I used to be," I said. Halloween arrived 2 days later. Evan's vampire cape trailed behind him as he darted from room to room, and Lila's fairy wings caught the light like stained glass. We handed out candy to the neighborhood kids, laughter spilling through the open windows. For a few hours, I forgot about bank statements, silence, and Arizona sunsets. When the doorbell rang near the end of the night, I thought it was another trick-or-treater, but as I opened it, my stomach dropped. Standing on the other side were my parents, sunburned, tired, their suitcases parked behind them. Ryan and Claire stood a few steps back, their kids hovering near the elevator. "Kimi," my mother said, her voice low and sharp. "We've been trying to reach you all week." I stepped aside, though my body tensed. I noticed. She brushed past me into the living room, her expression tight. Do you have any idea what we went through? The hotel froze the account. We couldn't check out. Your father had to call a friend to book emergency flights home. It was humiliating. I folded my arms. Imagine that. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she hadn't expected that tone from me. My father stepped forward, his voice booming. You can't just pull something like that without warning Grace. We were stranded out there. I met his eyes. On a trip I didn't even know existed until I saw it on my statement. Ryan shifted uncomfortably behind them. Look, maybe it wasn't handled right, he said, glancing at me, but freezing the cards. That was overkill. So was lying, I replied quietly. No one spoke for a moment. The air in the room felt thick, like everything we'd avoided for years had finally caught up. From the balcony I heard Lila's laughter drift in light and unbothered. My mother turned toward the sound, forcing a smile. Of course, sweetheart, she said softly. Come give Grandma a hug. I stepped between them, my voice steady. No. The word hung there heavier than I expected. You don't get to smile at them after what you did, I said. You told me not to bring my kids because it was too expensive. Then you used my credit to take Ryan's kids on vacation. You didn't just lie to me, Mom. You lied to them. Her mouth opened, then closed again. My father rubbed his temples. What do you want from us? An apology. Money. What? I shook my head slowly. No, I want honesty. And a little accountability for once. He started to respond, but I held up a hand. Don't, I said. Just don't. Behind me, Lila tugged on my sleeve. Mom, are we still doing the pumpkins? She asked softly. Yeah, baby, I said, smiling down at her. We are. When I looked up again, my parents were standing by the door, their faces unreadable. Ryan muttered something to Claire, and they began gathering their things. As the door closed behind them, the apartment felt warm again. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was clean. I walked back to the balcony where Evan and Lila were surrounded by flickering candles and pumpkin seeds. The night air smelled like cinnamon and smoke. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like something was missing. I felt whole. Still, somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of it. They'd be back, and next time, I'd be ready. The morning after my parents showed up at my door, the apartment felt heavier than usual. I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the look on my mother's face when I told her no, the quiet shock in her eyes when I blocked her from reaching for Lila. It wasn't anger that kept me awake. It was the hollow space that comes after realizing something you can't unsee. Evan and Lila were already up when I walked into the kitchen, the smell of toast and orange juice filling the air. Grandma seemed mad, Evan said carefully, not looking up from his plate. I poured my coffee and tried to sound calm. She was surprised, that's all. He nodded, accepting that answer for now, but I could tell he was turning it over in his mind. Children have a way of noticing things adults pretend not to. After I dropped them at school, I sat in the car for a long time staring at the steering wheel. The sun was bright, the kind of late autumn light that doesn't warm anything. I could have gone to work early, but instead, I drove to the small park by the river. I parked near the water and scrolled through my phone. My mother had posted again the night before an old photo of my brother's family sitting around a dinner table, all smiling, tagged #FamilyFirst. For a second, I thought it might be an accident, but then I saw the caption. Grateful for those who understand what family means. I locked my phone and set it face down on the passenger seat. I didn't cry. I just sat there feeling the quiet settle over me like dust. At work, Casey noticed right away. You look like you haven't blinked in 12 hours, she said, setting her coffee on my desk. I probably haven't, I admitted. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. Did they apologize? I shook my head. No. They think I embarrassed them. She sighed, her expression softening. You didn't embarrass anyone, Grace. You just stopped playing the part they wrote for you. The words lingered long after she walked away. By lunchtime, I wasn't hungry. I spent most of the day going through invoices, my fingers moving automatically across the keyboard. When 5 o'clock came, I didn't even notice until the lights dimmed. That evening, I picked up the kids from after-school care and drove home in silence. The sky had already turned the color of slate, and a light drizzle streaked across the windshield. From the back seat, Lila said, "Mom, can Grandma come to my dance show next week?" Her small voice made my chest tighten. "We'll see," I said gently. "Let's just focus on your costume first." At home, after they were asleep, I opened my laptop again. The credit account was empty now. No new charges, no messages. It looked clean, like nothing had ever happened. But in my inbox, a new email from my father waited. "You've made your point. Your mother is heartbroken. Call her before she gets sick over this." I closed the laptop and rubbed my temples. It was the same pattern I'd lived through for years, his quiet scolding her wounded tone and me falling back into line. But this time, something inside me resisted. 2 days later, I came home from work to find a padded envelope on the doormat. It was from my mother. Inside were printed photos from their Arizona trip, red rocks, a fancy hotel pool, my father holding a glass of wine. There was a note tucked between the prints. "We wanted you to see how much we needed this time together. Maybe next year we can all start fresh." I stared at the photos until my hands started to shake. I walked them over to the trash can, dropped them in, and pressed the lid closed. It wasn't anger that filled me. Then it was something quieter, almost like mourning. That night I called Casey. "They sent me pictures," I said flatly. There was a pause on the other end. "Of the trip." "Yeah." "Like a postcard from people who forgot they were supposed to miss me." Casey exhaled. "Grace, this isn't about pictures. It's about control. They're testing if you'll let them rewrite what happened." Her words settled over me like truth I didn't want to admit. For a long time I just sat there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the hum of the line. "I don't even know where to start," I finally said. "Start by not responding," she replied. The next day, I took a personal day from work. I dropped the kids at school, came home, and opened the box where I kept old family photos. I hadn't gone through them in years. Birthdays, vacations, holidays. In almost every one, I was behind the camera or standing slightly out of frame, holding someone's coat or fixing a collar. My mother's smile was the same in every picture, composed, graceful, perfect. I realized then how long I'd been invisible. I spent the afternoon scanning bills, saving copies of statements, and organizing everything related to that credit account. It wasn't about revenge or money anymore. It was about keeping proof of what had really happened, a record that couldn't be rewritten. That evening, I took Evan and Lila to the park. The air was crisp, and leaves covered the ground in a soft layer of gold. Lila chased her brother around the swings, laughing until she fell into the grass. I sat on the bench watching them, their laughter cutting through the quiet like sunlight through fog. When we got home, I tucked them into bed and sat in the living room with a cup of tea. The apartment was still except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I picked up my phone, opened the gallery, and deleted the last family photo that had my parents in it. My hands didn't shake this time. A message came through just after 9. It was from my brother Ryan. "Mom's upset. She said you wouldn't talk to her. You need to fix this." I stared at the text for a full minute before typing back, "Not this time, Ryan." Then I set the phone down, turned off the lamp, and let the quiet fill the room. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for choosing silence. It wasn't avoidance anymore. It was self-preservation. When I finally went to bed, I could hear rain starting against the window. The sound was steady, calming. Somewhere deep down, I knew the worst of it wasn't over yet. But I also knew I wasn't the same woman who used to apologize first. Something had shifted. The illusion was gone, and in its place was a kind of clarity that felt both terrifying and freeing. I didn't know what my parents would do next. But whatever it was, I was done pretending. And as the rain carried through the night, I promised myself I'd never let anyone use my kindness as currency again. The week after Halloween passed quietly, too quietly. My parents didn't call, and for the first time there were no surprise knocks on the door or long voicemails trying to smooth things over. The silence stretched through the days like fog, thick, dull, and strange. At first I thought maybe they'd finally decided to give me space. But as the week went on, that silence began to feel less like distance and more like the deep breath before another storm. Work was busy enough to distract me. I buried myself in spreadsheets and end-of-month reports, pretending that focusing on numbers might somehow make the ache in my chest less personal. Still, every time my phone lit up, my heart jumped. Most of the time it was just Casey sending a photo of her dog or a reminder to eat lunch. She seemed to know I needed a friend without me having to ask. One morning as I was pouring coffee in the break room, she looked at me carefully. "You seem steadier," she said. "You sleeping any better?" I nodded. "A little." She hesitated. "I'm proud of you, you know. Not everyone could have stood up to their parents like that." I smiled faintly. Standing up was the easy part. Staying firm afterward, that's the work. When the weekend arrived, I decided to take Evan and Lila out to the farmer's market downtown. It had been years since I'd let myself just enjoy a Saturday without watching my phone for someone else's emergency. The morning air was crisp, the stalls filled with pumpkins pies and hot cider. Lila skipped ahead holding a caramel apple, and Evan proudly carried a bag of homemade cookies. For a moment, the world felt simple again. But later that evening, while washing dishes, I noticed an envelope tucked under my apartment door. My name was written in my mother's looping handwriting. Inside was a check, not a full repayment, but a small amount with a note that read, "Let's move past this, sweetheart. Family is too important to let money get between us." I held the paper in my hands, reading it twice. There was no mention of Arizona, no acknowledgement of what they'd done, just a polite attempt to erase the damage. I set the check on the counter and turned off the faucet. Some part of me wanted to tear it up right then, but another part needed to think. The check wasn't an apology, it was a test. That night after the kids were asleep, I called Casey. "They sent money," I said. "Of course they did," she replied. "Did they say sorry? No, just that they want to move on." She sighed. "That's not reconciliation, Grace. That's them trying to reset the game." Her words hit harder than I expected. I walked to the window and looked out over the street. The wind had picked up scattering leaves across the pavement. "I don't even know what to do anymore," I said quietly. "Do nothing," she answered. "You've already done enough." For the next few days, I left the envelope on the counter unopened, except for that first glance. Every morning it was there, waiting, small, neat, persistent. By Thursday, I folded it back into its envelope and dropped it into my desk drawer. Out of sight, but not forgotten. That evening my father called. It was the first time I'd heard his voice since the confrontation. "Your mother's been upset," he began. "She hasn't been sleeping well." I didn't respond. He cleared his throat. "You know how she gets when things are unsettled." "I know," I said slowly. "But I didn't cause this." There was a pause. "You embarrassed her, Grace. You went too far. She's just trying to make things right." I took a deep breath. Making things right starts with telling the truth, not with pretending it didn't happen. He sighed heavily. "You've always been too sensitive." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was such a familiar line, an old wound reopening. "If that's what you need to believe, Dad," I said, "then fine. But I'm not backing down this time." When the call ended, I sat in the dark for a long while, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Somewhere deep down, I knew that conversation had closed a chapter I couldn't reopen. The next day I made a decision. After work, I stopped by the bank and asked to speak with the account manager. Her name was Janice, a calm woman with glasses and a patient smile. She looked over the files I brought, statements, transaction logs, the authorization forms with my parents' signatures. When I finished explaining, she nodded slowly. "You've already done most of the hard part," she said. "If you'd like, we can finalize the transfer today. The remaining balance will move under their names exclusively." I felt something in my chest loosen. "Yes," I said. "Do it." She printed the papers, and I signed each one carefully. My hands didn't tremble. When it was done, she slid a copy of the final document across the desk. "It'll take a few days to process," she said kindly. "After that, you'll be free of the account." Free. The word sat with me as I walked back to the car. For years, I'd believed freedom was something you earned by being patient, forgiving, dependable. But standing there in the parking lot, I realized it was something you claimed. That weekend I told Casey what I'd done. She let out a small whistle. "That's huge," she said. "You sure you're ready for what comes next?" "I don't think anyone's ever ready," I said, but it needed to happen. Saturday night after I put the kids to bed, I printed copies of every document and sealed them in an envelope marked with my parents' names. I left it on the counter beside the small pile of photos they'd mailed me from Arizona. I didn't know when I'd see them again, but I wanted the proof ready when that time came. Sunday morning arrived calm and bright. The air smelled like rain, and the light spilling through the curtains was soft and golden. I made pancakes the way my mother used to, flipping them one by one while the kids waited at the table. For a moment it felt like peace, not the kind that asks for forgiveness, but the kind that stands on its own. When I glanced at my phone later, there were no new messages from my parents, just one from Casey. "You did the right thing. The quiet you're feeling. That's what peace sounds like before it becomes permanent." I looked at the message and smiled. For the first time in years, I believed her. Still, as the day went on, I felt a low hum of unease. The last time things were this quiet, my parents had been planning a vacation. And as much as I wanted to believe it was finally over, part of me knew better. The calm never lasted long in my family. It only ever came before the cut. It happened on a Sunday morning, quiet and ordinary. The kids were still in pajamas, stacking blocks on the living room floor while I folded laundry nearby. The kettle was just starting to whistle when my phone buzzed against the counter. A message preview flashed across the screen. "Mom, honey, something's wrong with the card. The hotel says it's declined. Can you check?" I stared at it for a long moment, the whistle rising behind me. Then another message appeared. "Please call me. We're at the front desk." I silenced the kettle and turned off the burner. For years, I'd dropped everything to fix their problems: insurance calls, late payments, lost paperwork. My fingers hovered over the screen, but I didn't open the text. Instead, I set the phone face down and walked back to the laundry basket. Evan glanced up at me from the floor, holding a blue block between his hands. "Everything okay, Mom?" "Everything's fine, sweetheart," I said softly. "Just finish your castle." By afternoon, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Calls from Mom, then Dad, even one from a number I didn't recognize, probably the hotel. I let them all ring out. It felt strange at first, almost unnatural to do nothing. But with each unanswered call, something inside me settled. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was grounding. Outside, the day turned gray and still. I lit a cinnamon candle on the counter, its flame flickering against the window. Lila was drawing ghosts on scraps of paper, humming softly to herself. When she looked up, she smiled. "Can we make cookies later?" she asked. "Of course," I said. "Chocolate chip or sugar?" "Both," she said, giggling. I smiled back, realizing that this was the first weekend in years that hadn't revolved around my parents' needs. It was just us, warm, simple, and whole. By evening, the calls had stopped. The silence that followed was deep, almost serene. I poured myself a cup of tea and watched the rain drift across the balcony glass. That's when the knock came. 3 firm raps, sharp enough to jolt me. When I opened the door, my parents stood there, sunburned, exhausted, their luggage lined up behind them in the hallway. Ryan and Claire stood a few steps back, their kids holding stuffed animals, looking confused. Margaret brushed past me first, her voice tight and clipped. "We've been trying to reach you all day." I leaned against the doorframe. "I noticed." Charles's face was flushed. "Do you have any idea what we just went through?" The bank froze the card. "We couldn't check out. I had to call a friend to book emergency flights home. It was humiliating." I folded my arms. "Imagine that." His jaw tightened. "Grace, this isn't funny. They said you canceled everything." "I did." The room went silent except for the faint buzz of the refrigerator. Ryan shifted uncomfortably behind them. "Come on," he said, trying for calm. "Maybe this all got out of hand. You could have warned them first." "Warned them," I said quietly. "About using my credit for a trip I wasn't invited to." Claire cleared her throat, glancing at Ryan. "Your mom thought it was okay. She said you told her." "She lied," I said evenly. "And you went along with it." Margaret's face tightened, her voice rising just enough to make the children flinch. "Don't twist it like that. We just needed a break, Grace, after everything this family's been through." "Then you should have taken one," I interrupted, "with your own money." For a moment no one spoke. Evan peeked from the hallway holding Lila's hand. My mother noticed and forced a smile. "Sweetheart," she said, "come give Grandma a hug." I stepped between them. "No." The word came out steady, not sharp, but final. "You don't get to smile at them after what you did," I said. "You told me not to bring them because it was too expensive, and then you took Ryan's kids on vacation using my card. You didn't just lie to me, Mom. You lied to them." Her mouth opened, then closed again. Charles rubbed his temples. "What do you want from us? An apology? Money? What will make this right?" I looked at him carefully. "Nothing you can give me." From behind him, Ryan muttered, "You're being dramatic, Grace. They didn't mean to hurt you." I met his eyes. They meant to hide it. "That's not the same thing." He looked away. The tension in the room thickened, pressing against every wall. The kids stood quietly in the doorway watching us. For once, I didn't rush to soften things. I let the silence stay. Finally, my mother's voice broke through, trembling now. "We never wanted this to happen." "Neither did I said. But it did. I walked to the counter, picked up a stack of papers I'd printed earlier that week. Bank statements, confirmation emails, every charge tied to the trip. I handed them to my father. "You'll find your signatures there. Every transaction. The debt's yours now. The bank already approved the transfer." Margaret's face went pale. "You wouldn't. I already did." Ryan swore under his breath, but Claire pulled his arm, warning him to stop. "I'm done being your safety net," I said quietly. "From now on, if you want to travel, you'll need to earn it like I did." My father's mouth opened, then closed again. My mother's eyes glistened. "You're punishing us." "No," I said. "I'm freeing myself." Behind me, Lila tugged gently at my sleeve. "Mom, are we still making cookies?" she whispered. I smiled down at her. "Yeah, baby, we are." When I turned back, my parents were standing near the door, gathering their things. Ryan's face was tight, his voice low. "You'll regret this," maybe I said. "But not tonight." They left without another word. The door clicked shut behind them, the sound sharp in the quiet apartment. For a long moment I just stood there, breathing in the stillness. Then I looked at my children, their faces soft in the lamplight. "Wash your hands," I said gently. "Let's finish those cookies." They ran toward the kitchen, laughter spilling through the room. The scent of sugar and cinnamon filled the air, wrapping around us like something familiar and new at the same time. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the couch with a mug of tea. My phone buzzed once more, another message from my mother. "We got home. I hope you're happy." I typed back, "For the first time, I am." Then I set the phone down and exhaled. The apartment felt different, lighter somehow. The same walls, the same furniture, but without the weight of guilt pressing in. I glanced toward the window where our pumpkins still glowed faintly on the sill. Their candlelight flickered against the glass like small, stubborn hearts. Somewhere deep down I knew this wasn't just the end of a fight, it was the beginning of something better. And as I turned off the lights and walked toward my children's room, I finally understood what peace felt like when it came to stay. A week passed after the night my parents came home from Arizona. The air had cooled and the leaves along the street had turned deep amber, scattering in swirls with every gust of wind. Life in our apartment settled into a new rhythm, quieter, steadier. Mornings were spent packing lunches and tying shoelaces, evenings filled with homework and the smell of pumpkin spice candles. On the surface, everything looked normal, but underneath that calm was the echo of a door closing for good. I hadn't heard from my parents since that last text from my mother. No calls, no apologies, no attempts at peace. I thought maybe that was how it would stay. But silence, I'd learned, never lasted long in my family. It always came before the next wave. It was a Thursday night when the knock came. I was sorting bills at the kitchen table while Evan and Lila watched a cartoon in the living room. The sound startled me. It was too late for visitors, too firm for a neighbor. When I opened the door, my father stood there in his heavy coat, his hands jammed in his pockets. "Can I come in?" he asked. For a moment I hesitated. Then I stepped aside. "5 minutes," I said quietly. He nodded and walked in, glancing around the apartment, as though expecting to find something to criticize. "Your mother's in the car," he said. "She didn't think she should come up." I folded my arms. "That's probably best." He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "We didn't mean for any of this to get so ugly. She's been crying for days. Says she can't eat, can't sleep." I didn't reply. He went on, his voice low and practiced. "You know your mother. She panics, she says things she doesn't mean. But we've always taken care of each other, Grace. That's what family does. I leaned against the counter. You're right. That is what family does. But that's not what you did. He looked at me sharply, then softened his tone. I understand you're angry, but you embarrassed your mother, freezing the card, handing her those papers. You made her look small in front of everyone. I took a slow breath. Dad, she did that to herself. She's your mother, he said, his voice tightening. You owe her respect. I let out a quiet laugh, more disbelief than humor. I've given her respect my whole life, even when she used it against me. For the first time, he looked uncertain. His shoulders slumped, and for a brief moment I saw the man who used to fix my bike and sneak me extra slices of cake after dinner. You've always been the strong one, he said softly. Your brother's had his struggles. We just try to help him stay on his feet. I know, I said. That's why I paid off his debt last year, and the year before that. He looked away. He has a family grace. So do I. My voice didn't rise, but it sharpened. The difference is, I don't expect anyone else to carry mine. He didn't answer. The silence stretched between us until it became its own kind of truth. After a while, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded check. We can't cover all of it yet, he said, setting it on the counter. But this is a start. I looked at it without touching it. That's not the point, I said quietly. I know, he replied. But your mother needs to feel like she's fixing something. I nodded slowly. Then tell her I got it. He gave a small nod, his eyes flicking toward the living room where the kids were still watching TV. They've grown so much, he murmured. You've done a good job. Thank you, I said. He walked toward the door, then stopped. Your mother wanted me to ask if you'd come by for Thanksgiving, just dinner, no talk of money. I shook my head. Not this year. He sighed like he'd expected that. You're making this hard, Grace. I met his eyes. It's supposed to be hard. He didn't argue. He just nodded once, then left without another word. Through the window, I watched him walk back to the car where my mother sat in the passenger seat, her face turned toward the window. For a moment, she looked up and met my gaze, but she didn't smile. Then the car pulled away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room with a blanket over my shoulders, the folded check still sitting on the counter. Around midnight, I slipped it into a drawer without opening it. Some debts couldn't be measured in numbers. The next morning, Casey stopped by with coffee before work. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said, setting the cup in front of me. My dad came by, I said. They want me at Thanksgiving. She raised an eyebrow. You going? No. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. Good. You've already spent enough holidays pretending. Her words settled deep, heavy, but right. As Thanksgiving approached, invitations from extended family started trickling in. My aunt left a voicemail asking if I was still not talking to everyone, and my cousin sent a message saying she'd miss me at dinner. I deleted them all. Instead, I made plans with Casey and her husband Daniel to bring the kids over for a small meal. It was simple roast chicken instead of turkey pie from the bakery down the street. The kids helped set the table, arguing over who got the fancy napkins. When we sat down to eat, laughter filled the room. For the first time in years, a holiday dinner didn't feel like walking on glass. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I checked my phone one last time. There was a single message from my mother. We missed you today. The table didn't feel right without you. I read it twice before setting the phone aside. It was short, almost tender, but still missing the one thing I'd waited my whole life to hear an apology. Instead of replying, I walked to the window. Outside, the first snow of the season was beginning to fall soft and slow, blanketing the street in white. For once, the quiet didn't feel like waiting. It felt like peace. I turned off the lights, the faint glow of the snow reflecting through the curtains. For years, I'd believed loyalty meant carrying every burden handed to me. But sitting there in that calm, I realized the truth. Sometimes loyalty means knowing when to put them down. And as the snow fell heavier outside, I knew the weight I'd been carrying wasn't mine anymore. Winter settled in slowly that year. The days grew shorter, and the city felt quieter, wrapped in that kind of stillness that makes every sound seem closer. The kids and I spent more evenings together baking, watching old movies, decorating the apartment with paper snowflakes. Somewhere between those small, ordinary moments, I began to realize how much lighter my life had become without the constant pull of guilt or obligation. A week after Thanksgiving, a small envelope arrived in the mail. My father's handwriting covered the front in neat, deliberate strokes. Inside was a check enough to cover part of the Arizona trip and a note in my mother's familiar cursive. "We didn't realize how much we relied on you. We'll figure things out from now on. No apology, no explanations." But for once that didn't bother me. I slipped the note back into the envelope and set it inside a drawer. Maybe it wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement, and sometimes that's all you get. That evening, after putting the kids to bed, I stood by the window watching snow drift through the streetlights. The world outside glowed soft and quiet, untouched. I thought about how many years I'd spent mistaking peace for silence, thinking I had to earn love by fixing everything around me. But standing there in that glow, I finally understood peace isn't something you chase. It's what stays when you stop chasing. The next weekend, the kids and I visited the tree lot near the community center. Evan picked the fullest one he could find, insisting it had the best personality. Lila danced circles around it, her hat slipping down over her eyes. When we brought it home, pine needles scattered across the floor and the whole apartment filled with that fresh, wintry scent. We played music, strung lights, and laughed until our cheeks hurt. Later, when the tree was done, Lila curled up beside me on the couch. "Do you think Grandma will come see it?" she asked sleepily. I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Maybe not this year, sweetheart. But that's okay. We can send her a picture." She nodded, half asleep. "It's still pretty." "It is," I whispered. "It really is." As the lights twinkled in the dark room, I realized this was what family was supposed to feel like: safe, easy, untroubled. No performances, no debts to settle, just the kind of warmth that asks for nothing in return. A few days later, I met Casey for lunch at a small cafe near the office. She stirred her tea and gave me one of her knowing looks. "You seem different," she said. "I am," I admitted. "I think I finally stopped waiting for an apology that's never coming." She smiled. "That's not weakness, Grace. That's strength." I nodded, watching the snow fall outside the window. It feels like freedom. By Christmas Eve, the kids and I were ready. We spent the evening making cookies and wrapping the last of the gifts. There was no tension in the air, no tightness in my chest waiting for a phone call or a favor to fill. Just laughter and the soft crackle of the radio playing old carols. When the kids finally drifted off to sleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cocoa, staring at the glow of the tree in the corner. My thoughts wandered back to all those years I'd spent trying to be the glue that held everyone together. I thought loyalty meant sacrifice, that being good meant never saying no. But I learned the hard way that love without respect isn't love at all. It's debt disguised as devotion. Now I teach my children something different, that love can be kind without being blind, that family isn't who drains you, it's who stands beside you when you say enough. A few days later, I mailed my parents a Christmas card. No note, no return address, just a simple card with a photo of the kids smiling in front of the tree. Maybe one day they'd understand, or maybe they wouldn't. Either way, I had finally stopped waiting. On New Year's Eve, I tucked Evan and Lila into bed early and stood by the window as the city lights shimmered in the distance. When midnight came, I whispered a quiet promise to myself to keep choosing peace over guilt, boundaries over obligation, and truth over appearances. And as the clock turned, I knew this new chapter wasn't about starting over. It was about continuing lighter, this time, unburdened and free. If you've ever carried the weight of being the good one, the fixer, the peacekeeper, maybe it's time to put it down. You can still love people and walk away from the version of love that hurts. Thank you for listening to my story. If it reminded you of your own journey, share it in the comments. And if you believe everyone deserves peace after pain, don't forget to follow for more stories like this one.